Rabi Mohtar is leader of the Water, Energy and Food Nexus Research Group at Texas A&M University and founding director of the Qatar Energy and Environment Research Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Rabi Mohtar. Rabi, welcome from Texas.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Nick. Thank you for all the organizers. Thank you for those who are present with us and those who are connecting virtually. It's good to be here. It's good to talk about water. And it's good to be at this specific venue for this specific day. I would like to start by reviewing together the global challenges and the global commons, including water, but also including the interconnected system that water represents. I'd like to introduce the Water, Energy, Food Nexus as a platform for addressing these complexities, with some examples on the Sustainable Development Goals from Morocco that we've been working on, and also some examples from Texas looking at water gap. And I'd like to propose going beyond the allocative model that we have in water allocation that uses the Nexus as a synergy model, and I'll give some examples. Thank you. So the challenges of the primary resources, water, energy, food, among the many that we have heard this morning, includes the gaps that we have to look into the future. So there are future gaps in meeting the future demand, and more importantly, as we've heard earlier from the many speakers, in terms of the distribution and the equity in the distribution. So there's a water gap of 55% by 2050. Food gap, and we disagree, many of the science community disagree on the amount of the food gap and the distribution and equity of the food, and also looking at the energy gap. The more important part of the equity and the distribution and the gaps in these resources is the interconnectedness of what we see in the water, energy, food. So it's not only in the gap, it's not only in the distribution, but the inherent integration and coupling of the water, energy, food. And that model that we have had for many years with allocative model will fail, because we would need more than 100% of the water to run our economic engine the way we know it. So water is a driving force behind the food production, the current food production, where 72% globally, and in many areas of the poor countries of the world, more than 80% of the freshwater supply go into food production. And we also know that in developed countries, about 32% of the water goes into energy production. Globally, it's 15%. And also, it takes a lot of energy to produce food and process food and ship food. So that inherent interconnected make things much worse than what actually is. The Water and Energy Food Nexus platform is a platform to allow for quantifying these interlinkages between water, energy, food, and also help us zoom in on a hotspot for intervention. It also is a platform for quantifying the trade-offs, and we're going to be talking about trade-off. It also is a platform where the government sector, the private sector, and the demand in the society demand for water is actually present. The Nexus is at an equal distance from the various sectors, and it builds on the water productivity, it builds on the energy efficiency, it builds on the integrated water resources management. It's actually the platform that builds on all of the three legs, and it would not be a Nexus without having an equal distance from all of these resources. As an example of how the Nexus has been implemented in terms of taking levers or decisions or alternative pathways that are either policies, technologies, or societal levers takes them into analytics that help assess the trade-offs and help assess what I call the elements of the sustainability in terms of the water footprint, energy footprint, the cost, the carbon footprint, and the land use. It takes those and integrates them into policy decision-making, where the stakeholders, in this case, it could be a policymaker in a policy arena, it could be a technologist or a concerned citizen, that feeds into the analytics by setting up priorities for us to move forward. But the most important part is what happens with the dialogue. Nothing can happen unless there really is a dialogue, and I call this dialogue a multi-stakeholder, vertical, as well as horizontal in terms of the thematic and the governance part of that. Some examples of where we have taken this is in the Sustainable Development Goals, an example in Morocco, where we looked at these levers, and there are 3 levers. We looked here at the Green Morocco Plan, which is a plan that the government in Morocco put forward to meet the food security plan, the Morocco water strategy for 2030, and the Moroccan energy strategy for expanding and increasing the renewable energy for the state of Morocco, for the Moroccan government. And we did the analytics. So this slide is intentionally busy because these problems are very complex and they do require a lot of analytics. And the end goal is to look at what are the trade-offs that exist in our analysis. And indeed, there are trade-offs. In the food area, we're looking at by increasing the food security, or by reducing actually the food security by planting more cash crops and reducing the cereal, we are, in fact, gaining in terms of water supply and water security and the energy security. In the energy, by increasing the investment in the energy, we are increasing the energy security for the state of Morocco. However, there are the trade-off in terms of the water investment that goes into treated wastewater and the desalination. So the point here is that there are a lot of trade-offs that needs to be made in terms of the moving forward. I'll take another look at the state of Texas, where there's a 40% projected water gap. And in this map, you're going to see these green dots in the north part of the figure, where a lot of agriculture producing area. These green dots represent wells that are withdrawing water for food production. And as you move into the blue dots, this is a heavy populated area in terms of the population and municipal water. And there's a strip of red dots that you see in the map that represent the Eagle Ford Shale, where there's a lot of hydraulic fracturing happening. So the point here is that these levers, these solutions are spatial. They vary from one place to another, so there's no magic solution that goes across the board. And I will highlight few of these solutions. In the agricultural Lubbock area, we found out that some of the levers would actually promote the dryland farming. And just a quick note here that 2/3 of the food we eat on a daily basis is coming from dryland farming. So this is nothing new, and also promotes the renewable energy use for agriculture. If you go to the San Antonio area, which is one of the largest growing cities in the US, we're looking at to supplement the need for water and the competition for water between the agriculture, the municipal, and the energy. We found out that some of the high investment in low-impact development can replenish some of that water. And if I focus on the Eagle Ford Shale, which is the energy sector, or the energy producing energy hydraulic fracturing area, there is a clear trade-off between the energy security in that region of the state and the water security and the road safety. So there's always, we're confronted by trade-offs in the current allocation model. And there is a need for us to really transcend that into something more than what we've been looking for. So here's a thought that I would like to discuss with you, is in today's model, we are projected to have increased stresses on water resources. We're projected to have low resilience as we move forward with the climate change and population growth. We're also projected to have an added inequality of the access to water, and we are confronted with trade-offs between the various primary resources. We need a leap to the future, building on what we know today about the interconnected and the holistic system, using levers such as technologies, using levers such as social reform, political and economic incentives, using all of us, inclusive of the private sector, the public sector, civil society, to move into an area domain where instead of these interlinkages, instead of these interdependencies, move into create synergies that resulted from our understanding of the water and energy food platform that reduces the interdependencies between water, energy, and food, and hopefully improve on the equality and the distribution of these resources, and in particular, water. So here's a map of what these synergies and reducing interdependencies look like. In the water food, we look into moving away from the efficiency into productivity, looking at maybe scientific knowledge of safe genetic modification, also into dry land agriculture. In the water energy space, proposing into reducing the footprint of energy and water in the generation of water and energy, and looking at recovery and reuse. In the energy food space, we're looking at a new generation of biofuel and less energy for food production and full recovery of the biomass. I'll give some specifics into this vision, and I'll focus on 3 examples. The sustainable agriculture model, and I have to admit, I have the background in that area, and I do believe firmly that the current agriculture production model is not sustainable in the future, and I'll show you some example. And I'd like to also, was very happy to see the reuse been mentioned several times, and also would like to highlight the importance of reduction of food waste on the water and energy, and as of course land in this as an example. So the first example I'd like to propose is sustainable agriculture. Now, the word sustainable agriculture has been used and have been abused. This is where we are today. We are concerned about maximizing productivity per land, where the y-axis is a biomass production, and we're looking at blasting the system with water. And this is very relevant to the discussion today about water values. I think the model that I'd like us to be thinking of is a holistic model where we do value water, but we also value the input in energy, in the pollution for air and water, and the impact on soil quality and soil health. Let us not forget that at the base of the food security is soil productivity and soil health that we should not ignore. And I'd like us also to look at the portfolio of water. And so far, we've been focusing on fresh water as a basis for agricultural production. I'd like us to look into, in this order, and I insist in this order, starting with the green water, which is the dry land farming, dry land agriculture, moving into water reuse and wastewater reuse, into brackish water, and then only if we need to, we go into the irrigation. So that's the order that the call for this challenge is, where the efficiency is necessary. So I was very happy to see the drip irrigation example. Efficiency in water use, in any other resource use, is necessary, but it's not sufficient. We need to go beyond the efficiency. The other example that I'd like to highlight is the need for a smarter water allocation matching system, where the portfolio of water quality are matched with the portfolio of water use. There is no reason why we purify water to the highest degree that is not matched by the end user. And I think in the state of Texas, our primary research indicated that out of the 40% of the Texas water gap by 2070, 16% of that can be met only by water reuse to bring that deficit down almost by half. The last example I'd like to highlight is reducing the food waste. Food waste, globally, we waste about 40 to 45% of food that's all ready to be eaten. And our preliminary exercise that we've been working on with you and ESQA is that if we reduce food waste by 20%, only 20%, this is going to supply in Lebanon 3% of the total water nationally used for agriculture. This figure can be much higher in Lebanon if we produce more food locally. Lebanon does not is not self-sufficient in terms of food, but only that reduction in food waste would give us additional 3%. In Morocco, having 20% reduction in food waste would guarantee 2% of the national electricity generated. This is also could be higher if Morocco increase its food security. So there's a lot of potential there in the water area by alleviating the pressure on the water system by reducing the food waste. I'd like to conclude with one slide, looking at the way forward. One, reduce resource gap by creating resource synergies instead of interdependencies, looking at synergies. Increase resilience by localizing, reducing the supply chain, localizing primary resource security. Last but not least, improve distribution with equity and access. And I believe by localizing these resources, we can improve the access. And I'd like to close with the whole is more than the sum of the parts, and acknowledge the colleagues who helped support this research. Thank you.